Hey, it's good old boy Mike.
This is good old boy Dave.
From Sips, Suds, and Smokes. Sips, Suds, and Smokes covers wine, tea, coffee, distilled spirits, whiskey, scotch, beer, cigars.
People whose first name starts with Q.
Bad fake British accents.
And we always take time to make fun of the people of Alabama.
Banned once again.
It's a 1-hour episode that's mildly entertaining for about 22 minutes.
I think mildly would be a vast improvement.
While we do have the only beer show with the Holy Man, we talk about these products and rate them with our unique rating system, like our Suds 5 rating. Do you really have something better to do with your life for an hour than actually listen to this show?
Well, don't make them think about it.
Well, join us on this radio station, podcast network, or via our Android app.
It's mid-October 2019, around 1 p.m. on a Tuesday in a Georgian city called Brunswick. Inside that city, there's a neighborhood called Fancy Bluff. It's a predominantly black community. On the sidewalk, a young man stretches. Meet 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery. Dark-skinned with a thin, athletic build. He has an easy smile that not only confirms his handsomeness, but made him seem genuine and friendly. Ahmaud kept his hair cut close, and he stands about 6 feet tall. After stretching, he walks out into the street. Ahmaud is wearing a white t-shirt, blue shorts, and athletic sneakers, which need to be retied. He bends down and tightens the shoestrings up. Ahmaud stretches briefly, and then he's off. He starts slow, but then begins to slightly increase his speed as he runs around a few buildings. As he passes a few OGs, several girls, and a couple of strangers all wave at him. He waves at some and nods at others. Speeding by Spanish moss-soaked oak trees, Ahmaud finally takes off. There's freedom in running. It's like flying, like living in the clouds. Indeed, it's the highest high you can get without an altered substance. With the wind in your face, all of your problems shrink. All past mistakes, broken promises, lost dreams, and bad decisions for the moment all feel far behind you. Leave them back there. As Ahmaud starts to move into his stride, he notices someone is behind him. Thrown off by his new company, he slows a bit to see what is going on. Who is creeping up from behind? Ha! This motherfucker. An old friend and fellow runner. They jog together at an even pace. As they do, they laugh at inside jokes and easy insults. Ahmaud sees someone new in the corner of his eye. Is it another runner and friend from high school? All three of these guys ran track together. The third guy joins Ahmaud and his other friend. They are now running down the side of the street. The three guys have an easy chemistry. They chase the same girls, know the same guys, and hear the same rumors. Like brothers, they run in a beautiful unison. And just like brothers, it becomes competitive. It starts with Ahmaud, who, with a sly smile, increases his speed. The other two guys catch on immediately, and before we know it, they are in a legitimate race. They sprint. One of them tries to trip Ahmaud, hater. He fails. Ahmaud snickers and speeds up. The other pushes Ahmaud from behind to no avail. All three laugh at this failed attempt of sabotage. Ahmaud is still in the lead as they head towards the 4-lane freeway called Jekyll Island Causeway. As they reach the freeway, Ahmaud realizes he has completely left his two friends in the dust. But it's not because he's faster. It's because of what the freeway represents. On the other side of this freeway is Satilla Shores. It's always been a sort of barrier that separates and segregates both races. It's almost instinctual for the other two guys to stop, but not for Ahmaud, who has been there before. And now something over there has really caught his eye. In fact, it has him grinning with interest. His friends call for him. No response. What has Ahmaud so transfixed? Apparently, he sees something over there with value in it. His friends call again and then turn back and start jogging towards home. Ahmaud still stares out at Satilla Shores while jogging in place. Right foot, left foot. right foot. After a few more seconds, Ahmaud finally turns and joins them, but the grin on his face remains. A couple minutes later, across that freeway in Satilla Shores, an older man with glasses and a goatee grips a rifle and looks across the freeway and into Fancy Bluff. Far in the distance, he watches as 3 black men run away. This is Another Shade of Crime, Episode 1, Satilla Shores. Welcome to Brunswick, Georgia. The motto is, where we live life as it should be. Snuggled between Jacksonville and Savannah, and surrounded by the bluest water you'll ever see. Knowing all that we know about this town and what would happen here, it would be easy to think the town's motto is a bit hypocritical. But you'd be surprised to know, at a time this town was at least perceived as a model of a southern population that made a successful transition into integration and racial harmony. In the 60s, the Jim Crow fingerprints were easy to detect. Just like most of the South, it was very resistant to change. In particular, there's the well-known story about how local officials were so angry about the possibility of integrating a pool that they actually filled it with dirt. But quietly, there were angels at work. There was a coalition of black and white leaders that would sneak black activists into the city, and then they would have private conversations about how to integrate the white businesses. Now, the hard truth is, the town's racial makeup back then was nearly at 50%. The only color they really cared about was green. That's a cynical way to look at it, but hey, we take change wherever we can get it. There were still very difficult obstacles to overcome to truly integrate the town, but they got there quicker than a majority of southern towns. Eventually, even the KKK started getting pushback from the local police. Eventually, they got the message and their presence shrunk. As of today, Brunswick has a racial makeup of about 59% black and 33% white. And the crime rate? Well, the FBI rates the town as the 7th most dangerous metro area in Georgia. And unfortunately, it does seem like the town of Brunswick, much like America itself, has started to regress when it comes to racial issues. Oh, and did I mention this town has, well, let's just say it. There's a slave plantation. One of the historical tourist traps in this town is the Hoffel-Broadfield Plantation. Believe it or not, there's actually a program called the Slave Dwelling Project that allows people to sleep overnight at the plantation. It was a rice plantation that was originally called Broadface. In 1806, it was purchased by William Brailford, and after his death, passed on to Dr. James True. By the time he died, the land had swollen to 7,300 acres and had 357 slaves. The land was passed down through family, and because of debt, was forced to become a dairy farm up until 1973, when Ophelia Dent handed the property over to the state of Georgia. The plantation house was called the Hoffel House. The doors overlooked the entrance to slave quarters. That way the slave owners could see them at all times, what their property was up to. The slave quarters were small, smelly, and humble. They are now used as restrooms for the tourists that visit. One wonders what it must be like for African Americans in Brunswick to see this preserved and celebrated piece of what was a slow genocide for their ancestors. Perhaps no more haunting than the Confederate monuments and flags that are now finally being banished. Speaking of the past haunting the present, some visitors say if you listen closely during a storm or late at night, you can hear whispers and conspiracies about ways to escape, secret hideouts, occasional screams, and the sounds of rape. You can hear the sounds of the product of those rapes being torn from their mother's breasts And then there's the smell, that whiff of burnt flesh stripped from the bodies of poor souls. Even more disturbing is what some have seen. A little boy can often be seen sitting on the steps of the Hoffel house, foot of some visitors' beds, watching them sleep. The boy was born in 1882 and died of croup when he was only 4. And then there is the story of Sam. He was a carpenter that ran away from slave owners and managed to hide for several weeks. He was ultimately caught, jailed, and then shipped down south. This was back in 1807. He was purchased for $550. The former carpenter was likely flogged to death or turned into strange fruit. Sam and the young boy join all the other dead slaves and make up a grotesque sort of welcoming party. Indeed, these souls are likely not resting in peace. In fact, they may not be resting at all. What did Ahmaud find so interesting in Satilla Shores? Wait, actually, let's take a moment to run it back to Ahmaud's history in Braunschweig. That's what some of the brothers called Brunswick. Born May 8, 1994, he is the youngest of 3 children, 1 sister, 1 brother. Ahmaud was kind of quiet and reserved in primary and middle school. Indeed, his family sometimes worried because he never seemed to want to go hang out with friends. He entered Brunswick High School's class of 2012, and like in many cases, once he got to high school, he came out of whatever shell he used to occupy. Ahmaud was always the funniest guy in the classroom, on the bus, or on the playground, and he was usually the fastest. He was the kind of guy that would choose you first if you were in the gym class and he knew your weight or social status would otherwise make you the last recruit. He was a natural athlete, and just like most athletic teens, he wanted to play ball. He tried out for the Brunswick Pirates, a junior varsity squad. However, all that running led to a slender build, which did not lead to being a linebacker. Needless to say, the NFL career never came to fruition. However, his cousin Tracy Walker did make it to play for the Detroit Lions. Ahmaud, no hater, was proud of him, but it still had to sting that he did not quite have the skills to go pro. He ended up going to South Georgia Technical College for about 1.5 years before money ran out. However, these setbacks did not make Ahmaud bitter or angry. If anything, they seemed to humble him. His former boss at the Blue Beacon Truck Wash, Jerry Wilson, tells a story about how a new guy at work was sitting in the break room. He had not received his first paycheck yet, and so he was sitting there on his lunch break trying to look as if he's not hungry. Ahmaud comes in and stares at the guy for a few seconds. Finally, he decides to ask the guy why he's not eating. Shamefully, the coworker admits he has no money for food. He will either share what Ahmaud is eating, or Ahmaud will give him some money to get his own. The new employee gracefully chose the latter. Jerry Wilson saw what Ahmaud did and offered to give Ahmaud the money back for his employee. But Ahmaud refused the offering, stating, "That's all right. I've been there before." And it wasn't just Ahmaud's boss that was impressed by him. His former coach, Jason Vaughn, will tell you, although Ahmaud never made it to the NFL, it was not for his lack of heart. This guy died hard on every single play, even when the game was already lost. But one of the things Coach Vaughn liked most about him was the way he kept everyone's spirits up, even his. When Coach was having a bad day, Ahmaud would pick up on it and mock him until he moved past his anger into laughter. Ahmaud was very perceptive to people's moods and always tried to lift them up. It's December 2013, and in a residential area in Satilla Shores, a squirrel collects nuts. The squirrel runs underneath a few parked cars. It pauses briefly, and then heads towards a huge oak tree.